Hi, and welcome to the weekly predictions based on astrology for the week of January 24, 2022. To quickly recap the predictions for the previous week, my expectations for last week was that the week is going to be an up week. However, of course, the week saw significant losses. I think perhaps what we saw is that the beginning of the energy that I'm predicting for this week, and I had already predicted in my blog on tolstunka.com previously, where starting the 27th onward especially, there may be some significant concerns about financial policy, etc. And therefore, again, significant drop that I'm predicting for this week. Perhaps that energy already started sooner than I thought. Also, another significant event that we had last week, at least per Western astrology, is that we had the ingress of the moon nodes into the into the Scorpio and Taurus, which of course those two signs, they coincide with things like finance, banking, currencies, rates, debt, loans, things of that nature. So I think perhaps that is what has triggered increased concerns, at least astrologically, of course, increased concerns about this financial sphere in general, and concerns about the tightening of the financial policies in the US. So moving on to this week pretty much for every day of the week, I have a down prediction, but specifically starting Thursday and Friday, and no, that's not because of the FOMC meeting this week, but because of the transit of Mercury conjuncting US Pluto, which happens to be in the second chart, again, of second house of finance and banks. And Pluto itself rules things like debt and taxes and financial reforms, things that may be somewhat more significant and dramatic. And basically, I think that this week, especially Thursday and Friday, and even into Saturday, there may be increased news and increased focus on anything to do with finance, financial reforms, debt, loans, but also taxes and insurance. So for the background influences that are both global and for the US, and also there's some interesting developments coming up for China, let's walk through those dates. So starting from about Monday of this week into 7th of March, we will have Mars going through the sign of Capricorn. And of course, Mars with it brings things like focus on fires, firearms, wars, military, sports, any sort of action-oriented, high-speed activities. And of course, the sign of Capricorn has to do with government, large corporations, mountains, anything that's like a tall building or a high-level position, and is perceived to be fairly established, lasts a long time, or takes a long time to build and sort of put into place, like regulations, things that are hard, to put into place, but also take a while also to demolish. And so with Mars entering the sign, we can expect multiple sort of types of manifestations. One is increased focus on just activities of the governments and of the large corporations, so perhaps various regulations. So indeed, if there's concerns about, say, governments resting or not getting funded, etc., this will unlikely be the case. In fact, again, I think there will be increased news coming out about various governmental decisions, regulations, activities. With Mars, again, being the god of war, of course, there might be increased focus on military preparedness, deals like large-scale weapons deals or contracts or regulations of basically firearms sales, which guns may or may not be used, for which purpose, things that again regulate things kind of on a level of the governments, or it could be decision by a corporation, for example, like a bank, where they may decide whether or not to have business with a particular group of people, and they again issue some sort of regulations along those lines. And it could be like people or companies that say are involved in firearms sales or something like that. That could be one area. Also, the sign of Capricorn rules things like metals and minerals, any sort of these, especially industrial metals, various ore that's being kind of mined, etc. And those areas, again, with Mars being there, may see increased focus on either basically excavation of those, of like the mining of the ore, for example, or on the processing or delivery, and distribution of the products, as well as manufacturing, like maybe car manufacturing, large appliances, as well as any sort of equipment that may be involved in those areas. So some sort of heavy duty machinery, like, I don't know, big trucks or some big, digging machines, whatever that may be, as well as any products that are necessary to actually perform, like the excavation, for example. So maybe some sort of chemicals or something that I use for like crushing stone, or to break the walls or break rocks, etc. So any of that related kind of those materials. And again, Mars has to do with things like fires, explosions, and again, those could be used on the industrial level to indeed produce again some sort of materials. So those areas basically may see increased focus just in terms of being featured in the news. And also, again, there may be increased kind of need to either mine more of them or deliver more of them sooner, or there may be concerns about either some regulations. So, for example, some capacity issues where maybe due to some environmental concerns, some like a coal mine or something like that, or some other kind of mine may be closed, or maybe under consideration to be closed, or there may be some disruptions with deliveries. And therefore, again, there may be a push during this time, which is again starting this week through the 7th of March, there may be a push to kind of deliver those products faster, or to kind of obtain them faster, or to kind of move things along because, again, of some concerns about either availability or regulations or some tariffs, or some other kind of problems with either availability or delivery. Let's see. And especially, I think the value of these related either equipment or actual like commodities may go up from about February 5th through March 6th. And or again, I think there will be basically a time of some peak either demand for those products or some other kind of concerns, perhaps like supply issues or capacity cuts. And again, at this time, I'm thinking that there will be problems with availability. And so I think that, again, the value of those commodities may go up, or value even, or need for, let's say, equipment, or some concerns about the mines being closed, or concerns about governmental regulations of those areas. Other type of news that we can expect during Mars transits through Capricorn is any sort of announcements or green lighting of large-scale infrastructure projects that are, again, sponsored by the government or invested in by governments and large corporations. And again, this could be something like building a tunnel or a road, again, especially in the areas that are like arid, mountainous, or kind of hard to get through, like that involve crushing rock, or again, bringing heavy equipment, digging something, or even mining something. And let's see. And basically more news about various regulations, and at the same time large-scale projects. If they're done well, they may actually get green light. But again, those projects will likely involve government-sponsored contracts that are, again, most likely are awarded to large businesses. Then an aspect that already started mid-January, so from the 14th or so of January, we had Mercury turning retrograde, which typically coincides with things like delayed flights, for example, or delayed or problematic travel, where there's some miscommunication or something is not quite up to date, and things just kind of are delayed because something needs to be reviewed or reconsidered, or returned, etc., revised. And then Mercury will turn direct on February 4th. So basically, between those two dates, if there's a talks about maybe sale and agreement or contract, chances are then once Mercury turns direct on February 4 is either conditions are improved. So, for example, if the contract is pending, but there's, again, some sort of miscommunication or parties can't quite agree on the details, that the contract actually may be reached and things, the negotiations may proceed forward once Mercury turns direct. Similarly, if the contract was actually also already reached between, again, between January 14th and February 4th, while Mercury was retrograde, then chances are that the details of that contract will then be revised, updated, or penciled in if something was missing, again, once Mercury turns direct after the 4th of February. Similarly, from about the January 22nd, so this past weekend, through February 5th, the conditions are actually beneficial globally for projects related to IT, telecommunications, aerospace, high-tech, electric power companies, electric batteries, electric vehicles, electronic computers, sort of high-tech gadgets, as well as social media platforms. And when I say beneficial, it's something, again, when there is like a new platform or a new application or new maybe communication device to be announced, or maybe an airline plans more routes, for example, more destinations that it wants to offer, or bus company, etc., wants to introduce some new vehicles or something to its fleet. Those are all positive, kind of beneficial conditions for these projects to take place, and even the earnings of those type of companies may go up, as well as the value of the assets that are digital, including cryptocurrencies, but anything also that is based sort of in this online world that doesn't really have tangible sort of component to it. And the more kind of high tech, the more abstract, the more it may be seen as innovative and valuable. With the caveat here being is that we will have this is under the transit from Venus to Uranus, which is a beneficial transit. However, there are a couple things to note. One is that until the 29th of January, Venus is going to be retrograde, so there will be likely, even though, like I said, it is a beneficial time period for there being a green light for new projects, for innovations, for maybe new acquisitions, there will still be something either being held back or not quite developing in its full speed, or not quite being given the full value that it deserves, or maybe not being paid in full, or contract details about the actual costs and payments may be missing or incorrect, and this will not be corrected or kind of moved truly forward until also Venus turns direct, which is on the 29th of January. So at that time, I think if some assets were undervalued or lost their value, again, in the areas of like IT, telecommunications, airlines, even cryptocurrencies, any sort of digital assets, all of those areas may actually see a boost once once Venus turns direct on the 29th of January. However, throughout, again, through about the February 5th, we will see generally good positive influence for those areas to at least, again, come up with some innovative solutions, to propose new services, new products, etc. Let's see, then from about January 18th through February 2nd is an important time for the US, where it is also a positive time, even, again, regardless of the stock market value per se, but it is, again, a beneficial time for the US to make some improvements related to long-distance travel, transportation, and immigration, as well as international relations, and just in terms of moving goods and people across borders or long distances. So if there are any blockages or delays, despite, again, global influence still having this Mercury being retrograde at this time. For the US specifically, if there are any projects that, again, are looking to basically improve supply deliveries, for example, there's definitely an improved opportunity. Again, doesn't mean that opportunity is necessarily being realized, but there is an opportunity through February 2nd to actually move things faster or to reach some sort of agreements with other international partners that perhaps may assist with that, or to unblock some of these long distance routes to, again, move either goods or people across long distances. Let's see. It is also the time, again, for the US, January 18th to February 2nd, where there may be some improved opportunities for making legal changes, like in approving some sort of law to, again, improve or enable transportation, like I said, of goods and people in general, but especially things that are involved with oil, gas, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, beverages, navy, etc. So there may be either the number of, say, routes, for example, or a number of literally vehicles that are transporting such products or such equipment may increase, or there may be just number of laws and bills that are governing those areas, such as, for example, if some chemical was not permitted to be shipped or something like that, then there may be a law signed that allows it to be shipped, where maybe conditions are clarified under, how it needs to be packaged. However, there's no the bottleneck preventing it from being shipped may be removed again through some sort of legal means, like a law being passed. For China, the entire month of January is a time where there may be increased focus on developing, like, again, IT, telecommunications, high-tech projects, airspace, airlines, and anything to do with, again, innovation, as well as their own corporate currency, anything that especially is focusing on, like, the infrastructure, like I previously mentioned, maybe building either a new site for, say, a new airport, or site for a new power plant, or site for a new electric vehicle plant, something that is this of preparatory nature and something that will serve, again, as supportive infrastructure for expanding these projects in the future. Another time period that started also around the 14th of January that will continue through February 6th, and again, especially at the end of this week, this energy will be significant, so 25th through the 27th of January, that is actually problematic for China, where they may see some tensions with their partners, even potential for, like, a large industrial disaster, or some inability to reach deals, or the deals are postponed because of some rigid stance of one or more of the partners. And these disagreements may have to do with some long-standing old problems, something that's being revamped and hasn't been solved before. And again, it's still not being able to be solved at this time because, again, of some rigid stance and some kind of not necessarily miscommunication, but rather inability or choices, I guess, by partners not reaching to not reach an agreement. And the areas, again, as I mentioned, may be focused on telecommunications, like batteries, chips, electronics, airlines, anything to do with basically technology. And this kind of a stance, again, of one or more partners may lead to, again, either agreements being canceled, delayed, postponed, or basically even threats, or even to the point of, like, some military standoffs, or some kind of a more aggressive situations unfolding due to these kind of disagreements. And separately, like I mentioned, there's an increased probability of either just industrial disasters, or earthquakes, or some accidents that involve structures, maybe like a damage done to a large structure, perhaps again due to, like, an earthquake, or due to some military standoff. Separately, also for China, 18th through the 25th is an important time as well, where there may be some, for specific industries that are related to entertainment, so it could be like casinos or movies or sports. That time is actually beneficial for China, for those specific businesses, where there may be increased opportunities for making international connections, or related to long-distance transportation or communication. So perhaps improving some, the promotion of some movie, for example, across, international markets could be one example. As I mentioned, the end of this week seems to be a more difficult, more tense time globally, as well as for the US. And for Thursday and Fridays, when I think the market may go down the most, and or are the times, including into Saturday, actually, is when there may be increased important announcements, again, related to finance, loans, debt, and it may have to do, both globally and for the US, with large-scale purchases or contracts or investments that are made by governments and or large corporate entities. So, and specifically, it may have to do with either things like airlines, telecoms, and or digital assets, as well as any sort of government held, assets. So it could be, I'm thinking in the US, related to indeed government, like bonds, bond purchases, but something that will be on really large scale, and again, made either by a government or large corporation. So perhaps a large corporation makes a large investment into some digital asset, or it will have to do with, like, maybe an aircraft manufacturer, airline company, making either entering into a large contract for, again, either some parts or some sort of project related to, again, airspace kind of development, but it likely will be, again, made by this large entity and will involve large sums of money, and it will be something that is meant to last a long time, something that is not going to be, on-off small thing, but rather a large investment. And it may have to do, again, with financial markets, as well as anything to do with this high-tech, electronics, computers, IT, airspace, electric power companies, electric batteries, chips, electric vehicles, any sort of technology, electronics, electricity-related projects. Again, investments into those projects, contracts that are related to those areas, and or purchase of, again, government assets, and or a large corporation or even government investing large sum of money into either one of these areas, and or into something that is considered to be a digital asset, something that's not like a tangible, valuable asset on its own. And for the US specifically, like I mentioned earlier, we will have already we're experiencing this year Pluto conjunct US's natal Pluto, which is called a Pluto return. So Pluto will be more or less kind of hovering over its own natal position. So then other planets, faster moving planets, in this case this week it's Mercury, when they come and make transits to that same point, especially by conjunction, but also by square, etc. We will likely see increased focus in the news on various topics related to the U.S., finances, financial policies, the sort of how healthy the banks are, stability of financial systems, also things to do with like rates, debt, loans, insurance, and things of that nature. So this week, and actually also repeating later in February, around the 8th through the 12th of February, we will have Mercury conjuncting Pluto, and both of them will be again hovering right over the Pluto in the US chart. So there may be some important announcements related, like I mentioned, to finance, but also could be along the lines of tax reforms or insurance or rates or loans and debt, and even related to bank earnings, bank stability. And with Mercury being there, it's fairly, like I would say, lightweight planet, but it could be more along the lines of like reports, announcements, plans, contracts, sales, agreements, negotiations, rather than just actual like big, action just yet. For that, we'll have to wait for Mars to catch up, which would be on the 2nd of March or so. But basically, whatever the announcements will come at the end of this week, two things to note. One is that whatever the announcements may come up on Thursday and Friday, there may be some corrections or some follow-up on Saturday. And again, even though Saturday is obviously a weekend, with Venus turning direct on that day and with Mercury still being in that same more or less position, I think there still may be some follow-up. Perhaps if there's some strong reaction from the markets on Thursday and Friday, there may be some sort of follow-up activity on Saturday. It could be again along the lines of like either some large entity scooping up whatever perhaps is cheap at that time, like some digital asset, or making some investment at that time, or there may be some correction where maybe some policies clarified and a value again at that time may reverse of either some digital asset or some company or service or product that or price of, say, I don't know, airline tickets or something that is related to, again, IT, telecoms, airlines, electric vehicles, etc. So even though Saturday will be a weekend, I think still there might be some important news still coming up again Thursday through Saturday. Let's see. But then whatever the news that may come up this Thursday, Friday for the US related to, again, finance, generally speaking, that same issue may be followed up on, clarified, receive additional information, or some sort of a continuation of it will occur most likely when this time the direct Mercury that moves in the direct basically direction will come back again from about the 8th through the 12th of February. At the same time, that time period, 8th through the 12th of February, we'll also see Venus conjuncting Mars, and both of them will be squaring Mercury and Neptune in the chart of China, which happens to be in the 8th house, which again has to do with loans, debts, etc. So whatever like the preview or initial announcements that we will see at the end of this week, there will still be more follow-up announcements, follow-up activities in 8th through the 12th of February, which will both affect US, as well as I think there may be some tribulations or some difficulties or some problems related to, again, loans, rates, again, finance, and financial policies that are related to China. So something that, again, keep in mind, and something that to expect a follow-up activity on in February. And then let's see. Then moving forward, I wanted to just quickly touch on the predictions, just a high-level glance for February and March, because there's a lot unfolding. And again, these could be follow-up events to what we may be experiencing at the end of January. So, as I mentioned, from about the 5th of February, which is also, of course, when Mercury turns direct, so some of the previously made contract negotiations, etc., might kind of proceed faster at this time. But from about February 5th through March 16th, globally, there may be some focus on things like weapons sales, weapons regulations, like gun sales, weapons deals, but also regulations or sales or some connections, agreements that are related to sports. So it could be like related to a team, sports team, an individual athlete, or equipment that's used for a particular sports. There may be just increased news of either regulation in those areas, or deals or sales or transactions. Basically, maybe, you know, some athletes are being exchanged, you know, from one team to another, or again, there could be movement of weapons or contracts that involve weapons, and that's February 5th through March 16th, and that's a global influence. And another area that at the time may see some rise in activities and perhaps also rise in either value or profits, or not necessarily value, but like prices may rise on those areas. And again, they may rise on like weapons, for example, but also on athletic equipment, and or on, you know, maybe some athletes are offered large sums of money at this time, higher than before. But other areas that may also see similarly rising prices as well as rising profits, I suppose, because they will be raising their prices. Again, involve IT, telecommunications, electronic or electric rather vehicles, batteries, energy companies, electronics, high tech, and also any sort of financial sector entities that, again, either really rely heavily on some like mobile banking, online technologies, and or maybe like in a cryptocurrency exchange type of companies, or entities that are either use cryptocurrencies a lot, or they make transactions with digital assets. So those areas may see, again, increased news from about the 5th of February through about the 6th of March, and as well as either this is fees that may go up, or those companies may be making more money, or they may be seen as more valuable at the time, but basically there may be higher demand, and at the same time I think that the prices on those services or products may go up. And at the same time, for those same areas, especially like IT, airlines, like social media, or you know, anything to do with airspace, like drones, rockets, flying aircraft, anything that's being transported by air or goes by air, some sort of vehicle, like, I don't know, helicopter. In those areas, we may expect either some surprising, shocking, unexpected developments, against some sudden unexpected deal, or sudden rocket attack, or sudden, like, you know, maybe one, I don't know, airplane lands in the, you know, not wrong, but in a different location than expected for some reason. Maybe it's just some, you know, malfunction due to weather or due to some accident or just some miscommunication. But right around February 7th through 10th, and then February 23rd through 25th is when we may see increased probability of things like basically either surprising things like maybe an accident. And at this time, I don't think it will be as much of a problem, meaning like that doesn't have to be like a crash, but rather something just that is surprising. Again, maybe there's a strong storm and the airplane just needs to land in a different airport, or there's a sudden, rocket attack, or there's a drone and it's captured somewhere, or there's a, new discovery somewhere in space where some new, star blows up and there's some new cool pictures of it, or some discovery in the moon, but something along the lines of, again, of a surprising, a new, unexpected event. Again, at the same time, we may also expect increased strong winds, which may coincide with either strong storms or perhaps even start fires. And of course, that would be a negative manifestation. And in such cases, of course, there could be other related and expected situations where, for example, if there's a fire, maybe there's some power outage, in a given area due to power plants being affected. But that is the general influence, again, of especially February 7th through 10th, and then February 23rd through 25th. Then the time from being about the 7th of February through the 18th of February is significant for China, where there might be increased news about financial regulations, in particular related to cryptocurrencies. And again, there may be either some follow-up on their decision to crack down on cryptocurrencies, and or some announcements about, again, currencies regulations and or cryptocurrencies regulations, and or about their own cryptocurrency value, for example. And those financial type kind of regulatory news may affect the value of both cryptocurrencies as well as currencies in general, and or just the value of maybe the exchange between, say, USD and the, I think it's renminbi it's called, or yuan. So that's 7th through the 18th of February for China. Also, for China, starting again around the same date, February 7th through March 9th, and especially from February 9th through March 3rd, and then also within that time frame, right around the full moon on the 16th of February, full moon around the 16th of February, there may be some, yet again, difficult transits for China, where we will have basically Saturn will oppose Mars and Pluto in the China's chart, while Mars and Venus will actually square Mercury, Neptune, and the nodes in China's chart. So definitely increased news, again, as I mentioned before, about finance, maybe cryptocurrency regulations, some financial policies as well, or something to do with debt and loan concerns, basically, maybe about some bankruptcies, about some large companies, of course. But also there may be some announcements about like economic reforms, changes that may affect banks, changes that may affect stock market, lending, rates, and again, currency values. And likely these news under these difficult aspects will be stressful, upsetting, and at the same time, there is increased probability of just tensions again with partners, industrial accidents, earthquakes, or some problems, with like water erosion, where again, it may undermine some structure like either a dam, or previously there were situations in the past, I guess, under similar transits when there was like a stampede, for example, or infectious outbreak, major plane crash, a large explosion, and it could be a controlled explosion where perhaps again they're just putting down a new site for like an airport rather, or some power plant, and so it could be a controlled explosion, but something, or some testing of some weapon. But either way, it just involves like a shake-up, something that's like a structure that's being shaken up. It could be again by design through restructuring, or it could be due to an accident or due to some earthquake, for example. Either way, like I said, this might be a difficult time for China. That again is generally February 7th through March 9th, and especially somewhere in the middle of the time period, which happens to be also new moon of February 16th. So with, of course, it being the new moon, something to note that this, whatever the events that might be occurring at that time, chances are they will be sort of staying in effect, or will be highly featured in the news for the following 2 weeks until we have the full moon, which then we'll see some sort of follow-up conclusion, or the next stage of whatever the situation may then begin. But basically a difficult time for China, again, both in terms of probability of like natural disasters, some shakeups, as well as some financial policy changes or financial reforms, or even announcement of some bankruptcies or problems with loans, etc. All of that is possible for the particular time frame for China. And then within that general time period of about a month, around February 9th through the 19th, there may be specifically increased problems with international partners, or what China may consider to be its enemies. So this may involve some disagreements where the views of what China has for itself, some sort of goals or vision that it has for itself, may be misaligned with what its partners or quote-unquote enemies might want. And so there may be some conflicts around that, some strained relations around that time. And then again for China, from February 20th through the 26th, and especially specifically on the 24th of February, is a significant time period where there yet again may be some problems related to like infections, like infectious disease outbreak, flooding, pollution, navy, or even some sort of a recycling, something that happens sort of at the end of the life cycle. So it could be like a prison, hospital, somewhere, where again things are being recycled because they are basically trash, or something where they're buried because again that's how they're being recycled, through being buried in some landmine. So those areas may either see there being an accident, an outbreak of some sort, like a pollution situation, or there could be some problems related to, say, flooding, or difficulty related to navy. And especially the 24th, plus minus a few days of February, for China will be important, because what we will have there is we will have Mars and Venus will conjunct over China's Jupiter in the 12th house, which has to do with, again, things like medical and healthcare type of research, hospitals, and also navy, recycling facilities, etc. And at the same time, yet again, on the same day, we will have Mercury and transiting Mercury and transiting Uranus, forming a square, which has to do with like just sudden, surprising, shocking events that people are not expecting. So definitely a difficult time for China, right around, let's say, the 24th, plus minus, from about the 20th through the 26th of February. And then starting also from about the 20th, that's a different influence, but yet again for China, as I just mentioned, there are a lot of things that are happening in China's chart at this time. So from about the 20th of February and through around the 21st of March, so for about a month or so, but peaking right around March 2nd through the 9th, there will again be a difficult transit from transiting Saturn, which is of course a slow-moving planet. So this entire period there may be some sort of problems, but peaking right around early March is when Saturn, associated with things like losses, restrictions, problems, will be squaring Venus in the chart of China. And Venus, of course, has to do with things like earnings, profits, and is actually not too far from the midheaven in the chart of China. So basically, yet again, there may be heavy focus on concerns about profits, losses, financial regulations, but again, along the lines more of like cutting the losses, restricting things, removing junk. So maybe cutting down the number of partners, cutting down the number of contracts, reducing expectations, reducing losses. So more like doing sort of a preservation of the value rather than expending. So those are the kind of reforms and restructuring that we might be expecting. And again, that's from the 20th of February through the 21st of March, but especially focusing on 2nd through the 9th of March. And right around the same time period, that's globally now, the 2nd of March in particular, which happens to be a new moon, which, as I just mentioned, on the new moon, pay attention to what's happening, because for the next 2 weeks or so, that same theme is going to be more likely kind of permeating sort of the news and will be, I guess, in effect and kind of guiding what's happening. So the 2nd of March, which again I just mentioned falls within that same time period where We have a difficult transit of Saturn to Venus in China's chart, which is some financial problems, basically financial reforms that are that aim to cut losses and preserve value. So globally, what we will also have is Venus, Mars, and Pluto will be conjunct in Capricorn. And again, this is yet again focus on decisive, aggressive actions. Mars on making some really drastic reforms, Pluto, but also regarding, of course, finance, making sure that, earnings are still there, that the value is still there. But with it being this triple conjunction in Capricorn, the focus is going to be on long-term progress, long-term, investments, and having to do with large corporations. So maybe investing in what is perceived like to be a large, stable corporation, government, or receiving government support, or even government stepping in to do the investment to provide financial support to ensure this long-term stability. And that is again something that is going to be a global influence, as well as is just Mars and Capricorn being Mars and Pluto in Capricorn being there together. That also often coincides with actual earthquakes, shakeups, tops of the corporations, tall buildings, maybe leaders of the corporations, of the governments may see some sort of shakeup, so maybe step down or be dismissed or suffer an accident, be attacked, etc. However, at the same time, all right around the 2nd of March, it also happens to be, as I just mentioned, Pluto happens to be going through Pluto return for the US. So whenever this Mars and Venus are going to be conjuncting Pluto just by transit, they also will be conjuncting Pluto in the chart of the US. So we will have these three planets, Venus, Mars, and Pluto, by transit sitting on top of the Pluto in the chart of the US. That happens to be in the 2nd house of finance, banks, and currency. So definitely there may be yet again announcements related to financial policies that will be fairly aggressive. Again, possibly it's aggressive tightening, and aggressively trying to preserve, again, value by engaging in some large-scale kind of activities, financial activities that are, again, either supported by the government or include the government, maybe government bonds yet again, or anything to do where the purchases or sales are made by governments and or large corporate players. So something that is on a large scale and involves large large companies. And again, there may be shakeups, especially for the US, related to, again, financial institutions, USD value, and there may be some significant adjustments of like a USD value, or the value associated with like financial institutions like banks, any lenders, and of course also companies that are insured companies that underwrite insurance, companies that have to do with like loans and mortgage, tax collections. So right around March 2nd of 2022 in the US, I am expecting there to be news not only about financial policies, currency, and rates, or even bonds, but I think there will also be announcements that have to do with tax reforms. And in the past, under similar transits, what I have seen is there will be, there were tax reforms that had to do with basically withdrawing or removing some tax credits that were beneficial for first-time home buyers, or implementing tax policies that were, again, discouraging, making it less, attractive for people to invest in real estate, and making it less attractive for people to rent property to others, or less attractive for the first home buyers to invest in properties. So again, that's right around 2nd of March. If indeed such policies are announced, chances are, again, with ongoing also sort of transit of Neptune into the 4th house in the chart of US, which has to do with also banks, asset and real estate, there may be potentially some rush into buying real estate initially. And then after that, towards the summer, there may be too much inventory, and the real estate prices may potentially go down again, especially if there are these tax reforms or some sort of policy changes that are making it unattractive or discouraging, to invest in property at this time. And so whichever way you want to look at it, whether it's a global influence that has to do with, again, financial policies, financial entities, that seems to be significant for the chart of China and the US at the same time, and globally. So again, focus on finance, real estate, currency value, taxes, as well as separately, globally, increased probability of there being some shakeups. Literally, it could be just bad weather, some tensions, earthquakes, and of course, Mars conjuncting Pluto is a combination that also often represents like violent, aggressive, like protests, and with those two planets being in Capricorn, which again has to do with governments and large corporations, there may be some angry protests that are again geared towards some large corporations, established leaders, and or governments. So definitely a time, I guess it may be a difficult time both globally and for China and for the US all at the same time. Then moving into sort of the rest of March, another time after this that I see that may be significant is right around the 31st of March, and that's globally, will be another new moon, at which time during that new moon we will have Saturn will be squaring moon nodes, and Jupiter will be almost conjunct within about 2 degrees from the exact conjunction to Neptune. And so developments under that new moon around the 31st of March will be significant for yet another, or will give us an idea of what might be coming up in the first 2 weeks of April, which of course that's when Neptune and Jupiter will become conjunct exactly in Pisces, which, as I mentioned before, in the past had coincided with either major flooding, or it could be major like oil spill, major spill of some contaminant, major expansion that's related to Navy, or anything that has to do with like the water or happening under the sea, maybe some laying of some cables or oil pipelines, oil tankers, kind of accumulation of many ships or tankers or on the water. Perhaps it could be due to there being some bad weather, maybe like some storm or something that's preventing ships from docking, and of course that could also lead to, say, an oil spill. So all of those things could be related, but and that will definitely be, there will be some tense times coming in the early April, especially around the 4th and 5th, really. But since we're just talking about March right now, around the 31st of March, when there will be new moon, is when we may get a glimpse or the beginning of whatever the situations that may be unfolding then into early April. That may be a significant time, again, to pay attention to kind of see what to expect in early April, which will be another interesting time for us. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. I hope you found this interesting and having a fantastic week. Until then, guys, I'll see you next time. Bye.